Thank you all for coming. This is Chapel York's second philanthropy briefing. This one is entitled Women Changing the World, which is going to be a very exciting opportunity to listen to three really interesting and unique charities talking about what they do. I'll introduce them in a moment, but first let me introduce myself. I'm Nancy Vixen. I'm the Managing Director of Chapel York. Chapel York has been in existence for 24 years now, working with charities that are fundraising internationally and with philanthropists and wealth advisors who are giving internationally. We have been very privileged over the years to know a number of charities, and we felt that this was a wonderful opportunity in conjunction with our foundations to bring together wealth advisors and their clients to listen to briefings about certain areas of charitable activities. It's not a pitch event. So in other words, we have told our wonderful charities that this isn't an opportunity to ask for money, but to give information about what they do, the areas in which they work, and what they're doing to address them. I would like to introduce the executive directors of our Dutch foundation. That's Helen Maynard Hill, Natalie Mono, who is the executive director of our Swiss foundation. And they, together with our UK foundations, are the hosts for this event. I also noticed that we have Ralph Leonard, who's the executive director of our Hong Kong and Singapore foundations, who's staying up to be with us this morning as well. So before I again get started, our foundations are our outreach to both the donor and the charity world. We created this set of, at the moment, there's 6 countries: the US, UK, Hong Kong, Singapore, the Netherlands, the Netherlands and Switzerland. And soon Canada will be joining us as a way for charities to fundraise tax effectively in countries without having to set up their own entities, and for donors to be able to give internationally and with tax benefits. So we're very thrilled about this opportunity that we hope that you will all enjoy. So I'm going to introduce our 3 speakers. They'll each speak for 15 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer session afterwards. Best thing to do is if you go down to your Q&A, if you could put your questions in there, we'll be monitoring that so we can get questions to our speakers. So our 3 speakers are Evelyn Olsken from Free a Girl, then Happy Mwende Kinili from Mama Cash, and Alicia Luther Jones from Womankind Worldwide. Free a Girl and Mama Cash are both from the Netherlands, so we're very thrilled to be able to invite them to this. And Womankind Worldwide is headquartered in the UK. So if I can first turn over to Evelyn to lead us off. Welcome all, and thank you very much. I hope you have a fantastic session.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Evelyn Ulske. I'm the founder and director of Free Girl. I'm 50 years old. I live here in Holland together with my husband and 2 children. And let me first talk a bit about myself. I have not always worked in the non-profit sector. Until the age of 30, I was working in the commercial sector, mostly in sales, in marketing, within the advertising business. But I never felt that, satisfied. I always, I changed jobs a lot. And at the age of 30, I really felt that I needed to do something else. So what I did is I just quit my job. I handed in my car and my salary and my security, because I really felt that I needed to find my purpose in life. I guess I did. After a few months, I joined a big international development organization, and 1 year later, I was living in Asia, providing education, water and sanitation, vocational training, livelihood opportunities for children in several countries in Asia. So I guess at that time I really found well, my purpose in life, and I was really happy that I could actually contribute to people and especially children who are less fortunate. Well, I did this work for about 5 years, 6 years, and then I came to know about the issue of sexual exploitation of children and child prostitution. Uh, of course, I already heard about it, but I had no idea that it was such a huge problem. And I also found out that a lot of people didn't really want to talk about it. I was, to be honest, when I first heard, I was so shocked to learn that actually girls at the age of 6, 7, 8 years old are actually kidnapped, taken away from their parents and put in cages in red light districts in Calcutta, and are raped like 20 times a day. And I really felt sick when I came across this huge problem. And I was also kind of angry. I really felt that, why is nobody actually doing something about this in the world? And then I also realized that if everybody would just think like that, nothing would change. And I also realized that maybe I could do something about it too. And I guess that was the moment that already Frigo was born in my head. What it lasted, I think, for about 2 years more. And then at the right time, with the right people, I was able to set up my own charity called Frigo. So what do we actually do? We actually rescue minor girls from a situation of sexual exploitation, and most of the time that's within illegal brothels. So we actually go in these brothels, and together with the police, we free the girls and we make sure that they get all the support they need in terms of legal aid, medical care, education, shelter, everything. And if it's possible, we reintegrate them back with their families. So we are a very action-based organization. The issue of sexual exploitation of children is a very huge problem. There are actually more than, it's an estimation, but more than 2 million children who have to work daily in the sex industry. So that's a big problem. And we also believe that prevention and reintegration is very important. And there are a lot of organizations who are actually focused on that part. And we focus on the rescue part. And one other important thing is fighting impunity. So what we found out after 10 years, I guess, that a lot of the girls that we actually rescued do not report their case. So it's only like 10%, and that's the average also worldwide. So if girls don't report their case, there will be no trial and nobody will be convicted. And I guess then this 150 billion criminal industry will just continue to exist. So we felt that we really had to do something about that. So we very much focus on the rescue part and fighting impunity by providing the girls legal aid to actually stimulate them to report their case, and to assist them in the court sessions, because we believe that we can only stop this criminal activity and this big violation of child rights by making sure that justice is done. A couple of years ago, we also felt that the girls, the survivors that we work with, could play an important role in raising more awareness about sexual exploitation, but also to fight impunity. So that what we did, we set up a program called School for Justice. What we actually do is we educate survivors to become the best lawyers, the best prosecutors, police women, journalists, all kind of professions that have a direct link with human rights, to fight impunity themselves. So to empower the survivors to make a change within their own society. We really believe in this program, in this intervention. So at this moment, there are 80 students at the School for Justice in both Nepal and India, and we really want to expand it to many more countries, because they study mostly at the university, but at the same time they become the change agents. So they become the girls who actually dare to give interviews about sexual exploitation, to make to make sure that in their own country people actually care and speak about it, because there's a lot of stigma around the issue, and we feel that the girls themselves, the survivors, are the ones who can really break this silence. And I would love to show a short video about the School for Justice program, because we are really proud of the girls and of this project that we started. And to be honest, often people ask me, why do you? So it's already almost 13 years that I'm working in this field of sexual exploitation, and it's a really dark subject, to be honest. And sometimes it's also for me very difficult to talk about, or to hear the stories of the girls, or to also read the stories when we did another rescue operation. But the fact that the survivors themselves have such a power, and also want to live and want to continue, and also want to play a role in the solution, that gives me lots of energy. And I'm really proud of the students and of every single girl who faced so much darkness and is able to catch up with their life again. I'm really grateful that Frigo can play a part in that. So I would love to show you the video now.
যখন আমার 9 বছর তখন আমাকে সোনাগাছিতে বিক্রি করে দিয়েছিল। আর আমার উপরে খুব অত্যাচারও করেছিল। যারা আমার সাথে এমনি করেছে তারা স্বাধীনভাবে থাকছে, আর আমি স্বাধীনভাবে থাকতে পারছি না ওদের জন্য।
The School for Justice is a law school that will educate victims of child prostitution to become the most motivated lawyers and prosecutors India has to offer, so they can bring the people responsible for these crimes to justice.
We need specially trained people to deal with these issues, and nothing better than those who have actually gone through the trauma.
Girls who have a furious determination to fight, to demand justice, and to put everyone involved in child prostitution behind bars.
We are collaborating with one of the best law universities in India. The girls follow a 5-year education to become a public prosecutor, to give them the chance to get what they want.
আইনজীবী বা লয়ার হতে চাই, যাতে যারা শিশু পাচার বা যারা শিশু পাচার তাদের বিরুদ্ধে আমি লড়তে পারি।
যারা আমার প্রতি অত্যাচার করেছে আমি তাদের শাস্তি চাই।
আমি এই পাচারের বিরুদ্ধে লড়তে চাই।
আমি বিচার চাই।
Please support the School for Justice so we can educate more girls and change the system.
Thank you so much for your attention, and thank you so much for giving us a platform. Okay, thanks.
Thank you so very much for such a wonderful presentation about what you've been doing, and congratulations on it. Happy, could you talk a little bit about Mama Cash, please?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Happy Mandekinyili and I work at Mama Cash, and I'm really grateful to all of you for joining me this morning and offering us the platform to share some about the work of Mama Cash and the history of our work and what we've been doing in the last almost 40 years on issues of women's rights around the world. So who's Mama Cash? Mama Cash is a global fund that directly supports the work of girls, women, trans, and intersex people, and we've been doing this for nearly 40 years. In our work, we prioritize support to those who are most vulnerable, those who are most left out, those who are most invisible, and groups of people who are unreachable to most typical donors. We support groups, we support collectives, organizations, networks, and also we support individuals. And we do this because we fund all the various elements of women's rights movements so that the movements themselves can be stronger and better equipped to make sustained and collective impact. We do this because women and girls can and do lead change. And when they work together, they build strong and powerful movements. But we also do this because the movements of women and girls are sorely under-resourced. Mama Cash is one of the few organizations that is able to reach the most vulnerable women and girls around the world and provide them the support they need to create the worlds that they dream of and that they desire. We only fund groups of women, girls, trans and intersex people who are doing the work themselves and leading the change that they want to see themselves. We call these groups self-led groups. Because they need to be able to set their own priorities and to shift as their context changes, we also provide them with core or what we call unrestricted flexible support. And we work with the groups mostly for a period of about 10 years. Without this flexibility of funding as well as security of funding, these groups would be spending their time fundraising rather than changing the world. A hallmark of our work is to accompany the groups we support. What that means is we provide them with technical and capacity support in the form of connections, networks, tailored advice, and financial resources so that they can hire the local expertise they need. This allows the groups we support to build the kinds of organizations, groups, or processes that they need so that they can do their work effectively and efficiently. In addition, it's not us in the office of Mama Cash who decide which groups receive our support. Rather, the communities of the women activists leading this work actually make those decisions. We call this participatory grant making. We're striving to be self-led, both in who we support and also in how we operate as Mama Cash. In addition to providing this direct support, Mama Cash works with other donors and allies to try and expand the pool of resources available and accessible to vulnerable groups of women. So what has been our impact in response to the great need? Clear evidence shows that women working to change the discrimination and barriers they face receive very, very, very few resources. The movements we support receive less than 1% of all gender-focused development aid. And this is just the gender-focused development aid, less than 1%. Of recent private philanthropic giving, there's indication that grants for women's rights from US donors are only about 0.42%. That is less than 0.5% of total foundation grants. A 2020 analysis found that the types of groups that Mama Cash supports, nearly half of them operate on a median annual budget of $30,000 or less. They're changing the world on less than $30,000. We know this need really well. Each year we open what we call a letter of interest application window, where we're open to receiving applications from groups working on women's rights issues all around the world to apply to Mama Cash for funding. And every year we receive far, far more applications than we are able to support. So we did an analysis of the applications received from 2016 to 2018 and received almost 5,500 applications. And of these, 2,500 were eligible to our specific criteria. So for example, which of these groups were actually self-led? And we're able to fund 78 groups. So from 2,500, we're able to fund 78, or just over 3% of groups applying for funding. When we dug into this data a little bit, we also learned that 61% of the groups were formed in the last decade, so since 2010. So women and girls taking action and supporting them to lead the change is growing. Since 1983, which is when Mama Cash started working, we have made grants of 78 million euro to groups led by women, girls, trans and intersex people around the world. Last year, we funded 195 groups in 67 countries to a total of 5.7 million. This year, we just closed our window when we're accepting applications, and we received close to 2,000 applications, and we anticipate that we'll fund about 15 new groups this year. In part, because of our funding and other forms of support that we provide, the courageous groups that we support have been able to secure rights and shift social norms on a wide range of issues, including gender-based violence, economic rights, reproductive rights, and political rights and representation. I'll offer a few examples of some of the change that the groups that we support have created in their worlds. So one of our partners, called the Home-Based Women Workers Federation, working in Pakistan, lobbied their state's government until a change in the law happened where people who work from home, which an estimated 5 million of them, most of whom are women, were recognized as workers. Prior to this, people working at home were not recognized as workers. Because they're recognized as workers, they can now register as workers, and they're able to access all the rights and state benefits that come with the recognition of a worker. The 1 in 9 campaign in South Africa were involved in the mobilization of several collective actions by feminist organizations that led to the president calling for an urgent sitting of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces to discuss the gender-based violence crisis in the country. Proposals put forward included removing the possibility of bail and adding maximum sentencing for perpetrators of rape and femicide. For all who have worked tirelessly for decades to end violence on women and children in South Africa, the proposed law is welcome and an important step in the right direction. And the last example is a number of women's rights groups in Afghanistan, including Hamsada Radio, which is one of our partners, advocated for a newly drafted sexual harassment policy that will provide victims reporting incidents. Hamsada Radio also organized a 2-day workshop on this policy to further advocate for its parliamentary approval. If this policy is approved, it will enable women and girls to participate in public life, ultimately contributing to women and girls' engagement in decision-making processes and civil services. These changes would not come about or last without the strong social movements led by the women and girls that Mama Cash supports. I'll switch a little bit to talk about COVID and how that has affected our work in the last year. The pandemic has laid bare the inequalities that women face every day, intensified pressures because of loss of access to basic needs like food, water, wages, and healthcare. There's been overall greater and more invasive surveillance by state and increasing cases of violence. Women have been far more affected by income loss across the globe, with women and girls in global South communities disproportionately affected among women and left more exposed to the risk of austerity for years to come. The head of UN Women said that the COVID pandemic is the most discriminatory crisis women and girls have ever faced. 47 million women have been pushed to living on less than $1.90 per day. While many sources report that women and young girls are hardest hit by job loss due to COVID, we also see that it is women of color, especially in the United States and in Europe, who are losing income at the highest rates. Lockdowns, stay-at-home orders, and other measures have led to what the UN has called a shadow pandemic of rising gender-based violence. When the pandemic started last year, more so when the lockdowns were announced last year, we surveyed some of our groups to find out how the pandemic was affecting them. And we also worked with some of our partners to learn how COVID was affecting the groups they work with. So from the sample of groups we worked with, we learned that 29% of the groups were facing food shortages, 21% had experienced a loss or reduction of income, 15% had no access to water, and 14% had their health directly affected. Some of the partners we work with were no longer able to carry out their work because they were sick or their family members needed care. The shift to remote working meant that many of our partners who did not have the technological means meant that they needed to quickly get access to the technological means necessary to carry out the work remotely. The groups that were organizing communities to change laws and policies could no longer go out into communities to give trainings, to have conversations, and to take direct action. The other thing our groups were reporting was the pandemic was being used by all kinds of governments as a new tool to prohibit gatherings and curtail civil rights. A reduction in income for many groups as funding sources pulled back is also being seen because of economic recessions and also reductions in government spending. In addition to affecting the groups we serve, COVID has also presented challenges to how we ourselves at Mama Cash work. Like many global organizations, we have staff based in different locations and dealing with different aspects of lockdowns, from childcare to sick loved ones. If daycares were not open in the Netherlands, I am a single parent, so you'd be seeing my little one running around and jumping on me because I've been working from home and doing childcare all at the same time. So what is it that we are doing to mitigate the effects of COVID and continue to support groups to resist and to remain resilient? The groups that Mama Cash supports have had no choice but to respond to the challenges of COVID quickly. Some of the ways they've done this is coordinating and distributing food and basic health care, so including sanitation kits, masks, medicines, as well as providing information about how the virus spreads and how to prevent it, and doing this in various local languages. They've used their spaces to offer emergency assistance and or accommodation, as well as psychological support to the communities that they work with. Groups that before were doing policy advocacy or doing social change work are now supporting income generating activities because that's what's been necessary for them to be able to continue working. And a lot of groups are raising an alarm and trying to address increased violence at home. So groups created online systems for reporting violence, counseling hotlines, and psychosocial support. What we did in the short term, last year we launched a Recovery and Resilience Fund. This was in response to the acute and immediate impact of the pandemic, where we wanted to provide all the groups we currently supported with extra flexible funding to address their most pressing gaps. So for example, providing food for their community members or setting up and supporting remote working technology. We also contributed to the Global Resilience Fund, which is a partnership of social justice funders, which aims to shore up resources available to young women and girls organizing. We advocated for the health and labor rights for those working in informal sectors, such as women domestic workers and home-based workers, who often have no safety nets. And finally, and most importantly, we sustained our own core work. We took on new groups last year, and we kept on supporting steadily those who are already in our network. In the long term, even with the ongoing pandemic and the anticipated recessions that will make resources even more scarce, the coming 10 years is a critical period. For example, the SDGs must be implemented by 2030. It's a crucial time period for the worst consequences of climate change. The role of data and technology will continue to dramatically affect our lives. So for this reason, our new 10-year strategic plan offers a longer time frame to match the scale and needs of our movement building work. With nearly 40 years of experience, we know what works and will continue to offer core and flexible support, as well as tailored accompaniments to groups led by the most vulnerable women, girls, trans, and intersex people. We'll expand our grant making, giving grants to individual movers and shakers with great ideas. And we are committed to influencing donors and other people who are supporting the work of women's rights around the world so that there's increased resources available to the most vulnerable communities. We do this work to match the courage, need, and opportunity of the moment and the movements that we work with. Thank you all so much for your time and interest.
Thank you, Happy. That was so interesting about what you do. The Netherlands is really doing some wonderful things in its international outreach with you two organizations. Alicia, thank you very much for joining us after just having moved house. And we look forward to hearing about Womankind Worldwide and what you've been doing for a number of years, because I've known you for at least 20 years. So be interesting, not you personally, but Womankind Worldwide, to know about how you're addressing issues around the world.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. In the north and west of Uganda, more than 300,000 women have been evicted from their homes, and up to 1 million more are expected to be affected in the next 6 years. Women are evicted to clear land for industrial development, so for example, oil mining. Wealthy businessmen come in and claim the family's land as theirs. These evictions are forced with no warning and often extremely violent. So I wanted to introduce you to Asita. She's one of the women who's been forcibly evicted from her home. She and her family have been placed now in an internal displaced persons camp. She says, "I have 7 children. I have a husband and I'm 40 years old. Before we were evicted, I was in peace. I had a garden, my children were well, I grew crops, I was a businesswoman. We were evicted from our homes and we've been struggling to find land to settle and grow our crops. Finding food is a challenge. My main concern is that my children aren't going to school because when the eviction happened, they destroyed the schools. We don't have access to clean water. When the trucks came to destroy our properties, they contaminated all of the water. And they didn't give us any notice. They were beating us with canes. During the eviction, my husband was beaten really badly, and one of my children got a fracture when he was fleeing. Since that happened, my husband doesn't have the strength or the energy to go and work in the field. So I've been taking on the responsibilities as a mother and as a father. This is a big challenge for me at the moment." During the land grabs in Uganda, if any compensation is given to families, the only option is for that compensation to go to the male head of the family. And what we relatively often hear is that men take that compensation, take that money, and leave women with their children. In Uganda, land is owned and inherited most commonly from father to son, so it's really rare for women to own their own land. Womankind and our Ugandan partner NAPE, which stands for the National Association of Professional Environmentalists, help women affected by land grabs. We collect women's voices to help tell their stories on radio, to organise and gather more women so that they can take their stories to court. We run mobile legal aid clinics. So this is where women are able to receive legal advice. And actually through these, some women are starting to actually receive compensation, or even in some cases return to the land to reclaim the livelihoods that they've lost. And we also train women on alternative sustainable livelihoods. Asita says, "The first time I got to know NAPE was through the radio. They were calling women who had been evicted to go and voice their experiences. They wanted to know about our problems and have our stories told. After my involvement in NAPE, I'm so happy about the work that they're doing. Women here have come together as a collective. We go to the forest to gather papyruses and make mats as a group. We sell them and share the money. We share ideas and try to get solutions to problems. I feel like that has been a very good impact to have personally as a woman and as a mother, because I can always rely on the group to advise me on a way forward and work together to achieve it. If I'm still alive in the future, I want to get my own land, build my own house so I can live there and with my husband, and provide a good life for the children. I want to be able to take them to school and live in peace as one happy family." Asita, as you can imagine, is by no means alone in facing severe discrimination. We know that in no country in the world do women enjoy the same rights as men. In terms of violence against women and girls, on a global scale, gender-based violence, from domestic violence to sexual assault to female genital mutilation to forced marriage, affects 1 in 3 women throughout their lifetime. The global gender pay gap stands at 24%. Globally, women perform over 75% of unpaid care work, so cooking, cleaning, caring for children. And we know that this work is essential, but largely invisible. And it means that it affects the type of paid work that women can then access. Women don't have an equal say in the decisions that affect their lives, whether that's deciding how their household income is spent or how the country that they live in is run. Just 22% of all parliamentarians globally are women, and fewer than 25 of the world's nearly 200 countries have a woman leader. So how does Womankind contribute to advancing women's rights? So we were founded on International Women's Day over 30 years ago with the clear vision of achieving a world where the rights of all women and girls are respected, valued, and realised. As you can see, we work towards an end of all forms of violence against women. We work towards women's economic rights. We work towards women's equal influence in decision-making and their ability to exercise political power. And we very much work in equal partnership with 48 partners in our 5 focus countries, which are Ethiopia, Kenya, Nepal, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. For us, equal partnership means really acknowledging that our partners, local women's rights organisations in the countries that we work in, they're the people that understand better than anybody, what are the barriers to achieving women's rights in their communities. And we also wholeheartedly believe that they are the best placed to provide the solutions. So we don't compete with local organisations for funding or for resources, but what we do is we target our support to strengthen local women's rights organisations and the connections between them. So we really focus on building resilient, diverse women's movements, which then have the collective power to push forward women's rights. So for me, I know certainly when I joined Womankind a few years ago, I didn't necessarily find sort of concept of movements the easiest to get my head around or the easiest to explain to other people. So I thought I'd just really briefly, I'm sure everyone here's probably grasped the concept already, but I just thought I'd really briefly sort of define what we mean by a movement. So we talk about movements as you can see, broad social movements led by women, and they're organisations that campaign for women's rights, gender justice at national, regional, and international level. Women's movement includes women's rights organisations and other actors like activists, academics, trade unionists, and lawyers. We really focus on the importance of building women's rights movements because our strong belief is that real transformational change happens when women come together to organise and mobilise. And there's lots of evidence and research to support that belief too. Something that's really key is our intersectional approach. So we have a really diverse portfolio within our 48 partners of organisations that work with LGBTQ women, older women, ethnic minority groups, and disabled women, because we feel that women's rights, of course, are not just for some, but for all women. So in terms of kind of what our role is and what we offer to the partners that we work with, the first thing is connections. So in each country that we work with larger mainstream women's rights organisations and also smaller women's rights organisations who specifically work with the more marginalised groups. So there's lots of learning that we make sure that we're all sharing to try and strengthen the movement as a whole and connect organisations together. We amplify the voices of our partners and try and open up spaces for them. So some of the organisations that we work with are small and wouldn't necessarily be able to come to a national or an international policy space and be able to talk to decision makers about what their reality is like on the ground and what needs to change. So that's very much another part of our role, bringing our partners to spaces like the Convention on the Status of Women or the UN General Assembly, to try and make sure that when we're in those spaces, it's not womankind speaking on behalf of our partners, but very much coming from our partners in terms of, as I mentioned, talking about what the reality is like for them and talking to the decision makers themselves. So our aim within this context is that international policies are then informed by the realities faced by women and girls at a very local level. And the third piece is documentation and research. So often women's rights organisations locally are told by their local or their national leaders, well, you might be talking about this thing that's happening, but actually you haven't got any evidence to show that this is the case. So we know that building up that evidence piece takes money, it takes expertise. So one of the pieces that we work on with partners is putting together research so that they can take that documentation to decision makers and leaders, really amplifying their voices and making sure that what they're doing, the brilliant work that they're doing, is better seen and has more of an impact. Just to sort of start rounding off, just wanted to briefly talk you through one of our other projects to bring our life to work just a little bit more. So this is a project with our Kenyan partner Polycom, and it takes place in Kibera, which is an informal settlement, or sometimes known as a slum community outside of Nairobi. In Kibera, girls are vulnerable to sexual violence, unfortunately, including from parents, teachers, and the police. They face really unique challenges to their rights, including insecurity whilst walking to and from their homes and their shops, poor sanitation, and access to water. So Polycom as an organisation was set up in response to this. A particular case where a 39-year-old man had a sexual relationship with an 11-year-old girl spurred the organisation's founder, Jane, into action. And Jane talks very much about how these abuses are silent and girls don't speak or share of their experiences. So together we've developed a really innovative project called Talking Boxes, where secure boxes are placed in schools and girls can post anonymously about their experiences of gender-based violence or manipulation, or any worries that they have. We've placed these boxes in lots of different schools around Kibera and now secured thousands of testimonies of girls. And we're not just collecting their experiences, we're training mentors who hold assemblies with the girls to talk through their experiences and share advice and information on women's rights. So I just wanted to read this brief quote from Grace, who's 13. She says, "Before I was introduced to Polycom last year, I couldn't stand and talk in front of people. But then one day they came to our school and ran lessons on how to be confident and courageous. As the Talking Box ambassador at my school, my responsibilities are to encourage girls to use the Talking Box to share their problems with the mentors, whether their problems are with a teacher, at home, or with each other. Especially if you have a burning thing that you can't tell the teachers or your friends, you can write it down and post it in the Talking Box, and then you can be helped. In the past, when students had problems, they had to tell the female teachers, and only sometimes would they help. I feel safer with the Talking Boxes, where girls who are dealing with something can write a note and put it in the box, and mentors respond." So along with Polycom, we're also engaging the wider community. So we're educating parents and local community leaders on the different types of sexual harassment. And we've actually synthesised the findings from the Talking Boxes and produced an evidence report, which was launched last month actually, and has drawn national attention in Kenya. And really crucially, it's led to a promise from the Kenyan Parliament to reopen discussions on an amendment to legislation, which hopefully will then go on to protect the human rights of girls across Kenya. So I hope that gives you a sense of what Womankind Worldwide are about. And please do get in touch if there's anything else that you'd like to know or have a conversation. And our website has lots of brilliant resources and videos to to show you more and to bring our life into action even more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alicia. That's really fascinating what you've been doing, and thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
So we're going to have a question and answer. If you have any questions, please do put them up on the Q&A. But I've got a first question that was asked here, and that was, all of your organizations have been in business for quite a number of years, 30, 40, and 13, I think. So what have you seen, or what can you identify that's changed over that period of time, whether good, bad, or otherwise? And has COVID sort of changed that? In other words, was there huge strides being made and then COVID's taken it back, or just what would you say has been the biggest change over the number of years that you've all been sort of working? Evelina, would you like to sort of start us off on answering?
Related to COVID, the problem of sexual exploitation of children got worse. I mean, that counts for a lot of communities, and also the communities where we work in Asia. They were far more vulnerable for the luring activities of traffickers. Because people actually, like in the communities, for example, in Bangladesh, India, and Nepal, where COVID hit the community so bad, there was a lack of food security, lack of income. So people just give away their daughters more easily, maybe in the form of, there's a lot of child marriages these days. So families actually think that their daughter will have a better future somewhere else. And those so-called husbands are just pimps. That's really something that's increased a lot these past 12 months. But what you also see, and that's kind of worrying, is that a lot of child sexual exploitation went online. So because of COVID, the red light districts were closed. So for us, it was very difficult to find the girls. And they were actually presented or offered online. So on certain groups, even through Facebook. And then you could just order a girl through a kind of delivery service. So that was really challenging for us, because before we went undercover and could do this huge rescue operations, and now we have to find one girl at a time. And but we were already kind of prepared. So we invested in the past 2 or 3 years a lot on online research and building software systems that we can find girls in the dark web, but also on the clear web. So we were kind of prepared. But COVID's really accelerated this new way of offering and exploitation of children. So that's a kind of challenge. So so it's a new another I think how you call it, shadow pandemic that's also counts for us, I think, and a lot of social issues are affected more. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's amazing when you're not working in an area it's hard to understand some of the things that you've seen happen, because you couldn't imagine it. So thank you. Happy. You mentioned it in your remarks about some of the changes that COVID has brought. What about in general? Has Mama Cash seen a change over the years, just generally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So on the pro side, in the quarter century since the 1995 Beijing Declaration, statistics are showing more progress. So more girls are going to schools, fewer girls are entering early marriages, there's more women holding leadership roles, very few still, but still more than what was there before. So there has been progress. But at the same time, things are getting a lot more challenging. even before the COVID pandemic, we were seeing there was what we call organized and sustained attacks on the freedoms and rights that we as the women's rights movement had been fighting for generation. Examples are some of the gains that had been made in international systems such as the UN. We were seeing those gains sliding back. So governments that had been in the past historically supportive of women's rights are less so, and in some cases directly attacking women's rights. And talking particularly about this moment of COVID in the past year or so, there already had been some backsliding that had been happening, but the pandemic has definitely accelerated what is happening. So for example, international fora, which is important spaces where either the lines that have been worn, we hold those lines, and or we are able to access greater rights and freedoms. A lot of those international forums have just not happened. And the processes through which there were much more visible and transparent collective conversations are now happening behind closed doors. This is happening at international spaces, national fora, etc. So rights and protections are really rapidly eroding. And at a national level, also because of the lockdowns and all the different restrictions of movement, a lot of public spaces, which are important spaces for holding demonstrations, public education, etc., are not accessible. And so people are at home, and we're not able to go out and do the work that we have historically done to get access to rights. In addition, over the years, I think you've all noticed there's been an increase in autocratic governments around the world. And a lot of times, autocratic governments and their ways of being have a direct impact on the freedoms of women and girls. Actually, a lot of times, autocratic governments use and attack women's rights as a tactic for them to gain more power in their states. And they have definitely used the COVID moment to expand. So to expand surveillance, to expand restrictions on rights. And this is having a real effect on rights and freedoms that have been won. Every other day, I'm thinking, for example, in Poland, right? A lot of the restrictions around abortion access that happened, it had been beginning, but when COVID happened, it accelerated, right? And in the last year, some of the little space that was there in Poland around abortion access has been closed, as an example, in this country after country. India is another example of a country which had been on the path to a much more restricted space for civil society engagement. And again, under COVID, that has also accelerated in this case after case after case. And finally, for sure, the economic recession and the accompanying austerity measures that will be coming, right? A lot of governments are borrowing heavily to be able to keep healthcare systems open and working. And when the donors come knocking, the solution is often austerity measures. And austerity measures most often go to reduce funding for public services. Women and girls are the greatest users of those public services. So austerity measures most often directly impact women and girls. So even after the COVID moment is over, there will be a lot of, I think, years to get us back to where we were in terms of access, freedom, and rights. And we need a lot of support. We all just need to be rallying around women and girls around the world, because the need is exponential.
Thank you very much. Alicia, did you want to finish off with a little bit about what's happened?
Yeah, sure. I'll just be really brief, but just to very much agree with what's been said. I think particularly over the last 12 months or so, we've heard from our partners across the board that COVID has made things incredibly difficult. Just to give the example of Polycom, the Talking Boxes project, which is one that I ended on, because girls aren't in school, they're spending much more time with men in terms of even needing to get really basic products like sanitary towels that schools would usually be providing. So we've seen a real increase in the sexual violence in that community. So I think the key for our partners has been really trying to adapt as much as possible. So with the Talking Boxes project, we've taken boxes into the community, and trying to distribute sanitary towels so that girls don't have to get those from men that locally they might know. And we're also with Polycom running kind of empowerment sessions, or planning to run empowerment sessions with young mothers. So I think we've seen some amazing adaptations from our partners in terms of the projects that we're running. And I think just to say that something that's been really critical for us is providing our partners with real flexible funding, as Happy mentioned, that have, you know, very minimal reporting requirements, etc. So we can just say, we know that you're the people that know what needs to be happening right now and how to spend that money. So take this pot and do what you need to do in this kind of emergency situation, and not put laborious sort of requirements on that piece of funding for them, which we've had really brilliant feedback from. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you very much. Well, may I just say thank you to all of our speakers and for participating this morning. Really interesting information, amazing organizations. Thank you so very much. This event will be on our website, and information about the charities on the website as well. Next month, we'll be looking at something completely different. We're looking at organizations that are working in saving the seas and ocean cleanup. So again, a whole different area. Thank you to our participants. We hope you found it very interesting. And on behalf of Chapel York, may I just say that we're very privileged to work with charities and donors doing such amazing things. Thank you all, and have a very good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Or evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.